Hello and welcome to the Dailies on Network Television, where we keep you updated on our morning program, basically on what's happening on the papers, basically in Nigeria especially. I am Sada Elisha Dasha. Remember, we are live on Facebook, so you can do out to view us live there. Drop your comments, share, and also like, so that your friends and also your family members can follow what is happening here. And then do well to drop your own opinion and your views concerning any other story that is of interest to you. I have Rachel Tazi with me. Good morning.
Morning, Sarah.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm great. I didn't get to appreciate you as being a woman, and then of course being a mother. I think yesterday was Mothering Sunday.
Yes.
A lot of statues. I was seeing people celebrating their mothers and people who have been a mother figure to them. I think from Friday down to Sunday was just a time where you get to celebrate the woman.
Yeah.
And then looking at basic women that have actually contributed in one way or the other, whether in our economy, whether looking at even medicine, just talk about anything that has to do with women contributing to nation building. We got to celebrate them. And I think, Rachel, we should keep celebrating women
every single day, every single day.
Yeah.
And then it's good to have you back, Sarah. Happy to have you on the show. And I'm just realizing that I'm just guilty that all the Women's Day, and then I'm not one for celebrating and all of that. So I forgot to wish my mom happy Mother's Sunday. I don't know how to put it. And then Women's Day also, but women should be celebrated every single day. And I know we'll have men there saying, how many times do you have this Mother's Day? How many times do you have all these women? I mean, if you want to be celebrated, celebrate yourself. But we are here and we're going to be very biased and celebrate ourselves because we deserve that celebration all through the year.
Of course.
Yes.
Rachel, really, I'm happy to be back. Well, to our viewers, we will go straight into the paper, starting with the Metrics newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, external reserves increased by 2.83% due to foreign capital inflow and remittances. You can start with the details on the front page. Arsenal remain top of EPL at Liverpool. Man City share point at Anfield. You can find details on page 16. SIM NIN linkage restore bad phone lines of Nigerians or face lawsuits. Serap threatens NCC. Says NCC's action is an appalling violation of citizens' rights to freedom of expression, information, and privacy. You can start with the details on the front page, but who can you blame? It is the government of Nigeria that is allowing them to act in certain ways. The big story on the paper, budget padding, allegation tears presidency and Senate apart. The writer saying presidency exonerates Tinubu, says NAS padded 2024 budget by 1.2 trillion naira. It's concerning that a senator can employ such promiscuous tactics to fuel divisive rhetoric. This is coming from the presidency. Reining those who think a crisis-ridden Senate will better profit them. Senators warn Nengi. And then we have PRP condemns alleged budget padding, demands investigation. You can find details on page 2. After week-long funeral activities, outing service holds for Herbert Wigwe wife and son. African Union condemns mass abduction of school children, women in northwest Nigeria. You can find details on page 3. Sultan announces sighting of new moon, declares beginning of fasting tomorrow. On the entertainment industry, my movies minister to my viewer. This is a statement coming from actress Etinusa Idemudia. You can find details on page 16. Falana asks customs to compensate families of Lagos stampede victims, leave suspension on distribution of remaining. NGF says governors are taking steps to tackle food crisis and economic hardship. That's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at what the First News newspaper have for us. Coming from the speaker, we are having security agency must act fast to curb attack on schools, coming from the speaker Abbas. You can find more detail of that story in the paper. And on the issue of kidnapping, produce security master plan, charge tactics, pirate conformity, challenges Tinubu, urges the President National Assembly to fast-track state police creation, More detailed in the paper. Security agents neutralize 20 IPOP fighters, destroy 50 camps in Imo State. Tinubu's CBN reform will block loopholes MFLA exploiting. This is coming from Aguilar Lee. You can find more detail of that in the paper. And the governors here say we are tackling food crisis and economic hardship. You can find detail in the paper. Kano electricity transmission station gutted by fire. You can find more in the paper. And the big story here still on the issue where we're having alleged 3 trillion naira budget padding. Northern senators split as presidency slap Mingi. With the writer here saying federal government accuses him of making wild, unfounded allegations as 3 colleagues disagree with the Northern senators' caucus leader on allegation against Tinubu Akpabio in the Senate. Urge Ninge to rein in troublemakers, warn you can't use us to blackmail budget process done in good faith. More detail of that big story can be found in the paper. Alleged 30 million naira extortion, police arrest STS officers, POS operator, and others as Rivers Command dismisses officer, suspend 2 others. As Tinubu launches student loan scheme Thursday, Nigerians studying abroad seek inclusion. Well, they do well to go back and see why that scheme was being introduced in the first place. You can find more detail of that in the paper. And on school abduction, sub-regional forces conspiring against the government presidency alleges. Well, I hope that we stop all this game accusation and all of that and face how we can make sure that schools are safe so students can study without fear of being abducted or whatsoever. Now there is a massive protest in Edo over impeachment plot against Shaibu. We can see picture stories actually showing some of the followers actually saying no impeachment move against the deputy governor. With the writer here saying as protesters urges the governor and the speaker to hearken to MFM People's Voice declare impeachment plot as persecution. Catholic priest admonishes Obaseki to forgive his stupidity. You can find more detail in the paper. And concerning the Muslim faithful, we're seeing that Ramadan fasting is beginning today. The Sultan have declared after sighting the moon yesterday in Sokoto State. And that's all on First News newspaper.
On Daily Struggle newspaper, PRP to Tinubu, don't sweep Northern senators 3 trillion naira budget padding allegation under the carpet. Abuja residents groan over water scarcity. Northern senators allege 3 trillion naira budget padding. This is for 2024 budget. You can find details on page 8. Tinubu orders custom to return seized food items to owners. The big story, inauguration of Katamul Anbiya Institute of Islamic Science marks milestone in Kano. You can find details inside the paper. We're tackling food crisis, economic hardship, a statement from governors. Over 6 million Nigerians displaced by insecurity and disasters, a report from the federal government. And on insecurity, Governor Lawal commissions Office Complex of Zamfara Security Trust Fund pledges full support. Blackout imminent in Kano as fire engulfs power transmission station. And that's all news on Daily Struggle newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper where we have National Assembly padded 2024 budget by 1.2 trillion naira, not Tinubu, coming from the presidency. Edo Guba, how Edo South leaders Obaseki agreed on the PDP running mate. You can find detail of that on page 23. And we have a Monday interview being done for Professor Okonkwo where he's talking about the state of the nation and the reason why we can't continue on like this. So if you want to know more about that interview, you can check that on page 14 of the Vanguard newspaper. The big story says business is suffocating as energy costs shoot skyward, up by 41% to 635 billion naira. Its second biggest problem after forex, coming from Muda Yusuf. High energy costs crippling operations, coming from Ogumu, the oil MD. And then we have 98% rise in our selling and distribution expenses due to diesel costs, coming from the BUA Food. Implement power sector eligible customer initiative, X-Man boss to the federal government. And we have operators blame the low generation as rationing persists nationwide, still talking about the issue of energy, which you can find on page 9 of the Vanguard paper. The issue of hunger still in the land. If federal government fails to secure farmers, food prices will remain high. This is a report coming from Fakan. You can find that on page 5. Fresh suit asks court to deregister Labour Party bar candidates. You can find that on page 8. My husband won't be distracted by the current challenges coming from Oluremi Tinubu, reassuring Nigerians. We have also a column for sport on the African Games, gold reign for Team Nigeria. You can find more detail. And another column here we have coming from Lakafa. You can find more detail of that story inside the paper, and that's all on the Vanguard newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, Ondo 2024, disquiet in PDP APC over governorship primaries. Tinubu to meet stakeholders in April as Aiyedatiwa Ibrahim intensify lobby. You can find details on page 23 and 30. Custom must compensate families of Lagos stampede victims. A statement from Falana wants further distribution done through LGs. Air Holding to lead Africa's digital evolution launches air technologies. You can find details on page 16. The big story on the paper, alleged budget padding, lawmakers set for stormy session. Senate Appropriation Committee meets and keeps mum. Presidency says Tinubu presented 27 trillion naira budget, not 25 trillion naira. You can find details on page 5. Lagos government begins enforcement of drainages right of way. You can find details on page 30. This is on flooding. Beavers can be used for Oyo LG port. This is coming from OYSIEC. You can find details to why it can't be used. You can find details on page 8. NDLEA arrests 2 grandpas, uncovers illicit drug consignment in commercial bus engine. Why Naira remains under intense pressure. This is a report. Benue APC crisis gets messier, 2 chairmen emerge. We are authentic stakeholders in Ekiti PDP coming from a fire-shaped group. More details can be found on page 23, and that's all news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Blueprint newspaper, Orosaya report, I will cut governance costs, control inflation and others. Coming from the RMAFC, we are tackling the hike in food prices coming from governors. Abuja housewives decry high cost of living. We can find detail of that on page 17. Abduction of Kaduna school children, Borno IDPs, cowardly. This is coming from the federal government, and I hope that the federal government will sweep into action. Beyond just saying that this is a cowardly approach coming from this whatever, whether it hurts me, and it breaks my heart, especially Rich. I remember you and I have had this conversation a number of times, the fact that, okay, where we're seeing that these people have been displaced from their homes, and then right now they're living in a camp, and then we're seeing that they're not even safe in the camps, that these people get to be followed to the camp and then being a threat. Now the question will be, what are our security operatives doing to make sure that the IDPs are safe? We've had instances where we see that even in the IDP, some of them are being raped, some of them don't have the basic amenities that they need to be comfortable. And here we're seeing that we're having Abuja residents that are afraid of abduction in schools. We're having abductions still going on presently. And the question here is, what are our government doing concerning all of these things that are happening presently? Because right now we're seeing that students are no longer safe. I mean, I've made examples here whereby we see some of the students sleeping with short knicker, with shorts, just so that they don't get, or because they are afraid that in case anything happens, they get. You see them bringing out certain plan on which side of the fence is proper for them to jump and all of that. And we can see that this is really affecting the performance of students in school. So we are hoping that, I know presently the president might look like there's quite a lot for him to handle. Is he going to be looking at the issue of inflation? Is he going to be looking at the issue of no energy? Is he going to be looking at the fact that some of our health sectors, or is he going to even be looking at the fact that insecurity is going on, and that is why he has cabinet members. We keep
Right.
saying that. What are our ministers doing? What are some of the senators? Are you just sitting down there quiet, not doing anything to make sure that something is being done? So right now, it's not about pointing a finger or saying that this is a coward move coming from them, but then beyond saying that this is coward, it's also going to be cowardly of our leaders. They should sit back and just keep talking and not doing anything to prevent this. And here we are saying that they're saying if something is not being done to even protect farmers, we're going to see that what we are seeing presently is just a test, because it's a matter of time before you see that. Right now we're saying that there's no even matches for 10 naira. Matches right now is 13 naira richer. So that is to say that even biscuits that you can buy for you, there's no 15 naira biscuits anymore. So a number of things are really going high, and so there's a lot that our government need to sit down and really tackle if only we want to go and move forward as a country eventually.
And it's very funny that the federal government is referring to the act of kidnapping in whether the IDP camp or in school as a cowardly behavior for coming from these insurgents, terrorists, and, you know, criminals in the country. They are having an agenda, and they are achieving it every single day, regardless of what you call it. They are brave in what they do, in as much as it's crime. Why? Because they are successful. Now the question is, who is the coward? Is it the person that sets out to say we are going out to kidnap school children and successfully kidnap those school children, or the ones that keep saying we will call them to book and never cause anybody to book? That's the question here. Who is the coward? The person successful in their scheme, whether good or bad, or the person not being successful in a good scheme, that is to make sure there's security, to make sure that there is no kidnapping, to make sure these people get ransom. Tomorrow, you will see the parents of these children on their toes, because these kidnappers will eventually call them and say you have to pay 1 million per head. And these people are succeeding in their scheme. In as much as it's a criminal activity, they are being successful. And who is the coward? Is it the person that is in the position to have all the resources and stop all of these things from happening, and yet keep saying the same thing and does nothing differently? And we keep having the same report over and over. So it's funny when the government literally use a word that describes them, and use it on kidnappers, use it on criminals and all of them, and then the word literally just describes who they are rather than the opposite person. So I'm just hoping that rather than our government just carving words to describe and look like they are on it, they should be on it. By now, we should have seen these children being rescued. Because anytime, my concern is that anytime there's a large number of adoption, these children hardly come back home in all their numbers. We're looking at over 200 to 280 abducted school children. That is just for that happened in Kaduna. Now we don't know how much for the IDP. And usually when there's no number being accounted for fully, the problem is that when they start releasing them batch by batch, setting in things that the government needs to do, before you know it, these children become a forgotten issue. And then we are moving on to 100 days, we are moving on to 365 days, and before you know it, is years gone. And then you wonder who is not acting. If these people are succeeding in their evil and in their wickedness, and then the people who are supposed to be the one rescuing people from this predicament are not succeeding, you wonder, where are we heading? Where are we heading towards? So I just hope that the government wakes up. Stop talking and act. We are tired of you talking. We are tired of saying the federal government is saying this. We want to see action. And the action is that, first of all, every single soul get free. Whoever had been abducted should get free. And then secondly, it shouldn't repeat itself again. Until we get to that position, I think whose act is the cowardly act here is that of the federal government, and not these people who are recording success in their evil scheme every single day. When they go out to do something, they have success. And when the federal government say they'll do something, there's zero or little or no success at all. So I just hope that we just wake up and then do the needful eventually.
Richard, you just hit the point on the head, the fact that, I mean, talk is cheap, and I think Nigerians are tired of talks coming from the government. They want to see moves to get.
Yeah, we do.
So we hope that we see the government doing that. Still on the Blueprint newspaper, we have court order NYSC to pay the Kite court members 5 million naira. More detail of that found in the paper. Nigerians merchandise trade rises to 71.88 trillion naira in 2023. And on All African Games, Team Nigeria wrestlers win 6 gold medals to get $3,000. More detail in the paper. Presidency denies budget padding. Mingi rigs suspension with the rider allegation. Business says Senators Kirimi, Zam and Shivu. Troops destroy IPOB Supreme Headquarters, kill 20. Sultan announces commencement of Ramadan today. Pay wages commensurate with the current reality. NLC urges the federal government. You can find detail of that inside the paper. And that's all on Blueprint newspaper.
On the Voice of Liberty newspaper, starting with the big story. So Ramadan, Muslims commence fasting today as crescent moon is sighted. NLC yet to determine new minimum wage, a statement from Majero. Go beyond issuing directives, demand results to end insecurity, ACF tells the federal government. 6.1 million Nigerians displaced by insecurity, natural disasters. This is coming from Refugee Commission. Tinubu can't revive economy without holding Buhari's ministers accountable. Obasanjo, former aide. This is a statement coming from the former aide of Obasanjo. And on insecurity in Imo State, security agents kill 20 IPOB fighters, destroy 50 hideouts. On 2024 budget, where is 3 trillion naira? This is a question for northern senators, and then we are demanding answers. This is from Tinubu and then Akpabio. So we want to know, where is that extra money that has been added to the budget? Where is it going to? Because there are allegations of budget padding ongoing, and that's all the news on Voice of Liberty.
On the Leadership newspaper, federal government to patronize local contractors in road project, coming from the Minister of Roads. You can find more, Minister of Work rather, you can find more detail of that on page 18. And what is actually on fact check here, we're having, why did El-Rufai son says, what did El-Rufai son say about Obi? That's a question. And on what's trending, bandits kidnapped 15 students in Sokoto. You can find detail of that on page 2. Naira value dips as external reserve rises to $34.11 billion. The big story here, alleged 3 trillion naira budget padding. Public record contradicts northern senators. Presidency dismisses Ninge's claim. Lawmakers have the duty to scrutinize the budget. And then the president cited what National Assembly transmitted to him coming from experts. Troops clear 50 IPOB hideouts, kill 20 fighters. At last, the student loan scheme for launch on Thursday, and we hope that everybody that actually applied and gave a valid reason will actually get this loan, because a number of students are still yet to pay their tuition fee, and they depend on this loan to be able to meet up and pay. We know some schools are actually the second semester presently, and then some schools actually make it in a way that you pay part first semester and then another second semester. So we hope that we see that the Thursday will be Thursday, there will be no extension. Borno confirmed return of 9 IDPs. We hope to find more numbers being returning back to the camp. Mina Airport renamed after Tinubu. You can find detail of that on page 15. And we have Yari annual Ramadan feeding program benefit 250,000 households. You can find more detail of that inside the paper. And the picture story here we're having is Palestinian witness the bearer of those killed in Israeli strike and fire after their bodies were released by Israel at a mass grave in the southern Gaza. You can find more detail for those who are interested in the international scene, and that's all on Leadership newspaper.
On this day, NECA-CPPE commend federal government suspension of $15,000 expatriate employment levy. Say move shows Tinubu runs listening government. EIU raises Nigeria's 2024 economic growth forecast to 2.5% on rising oil output. Ramadan begins today, Sultan of Sokoto declares. The big story on the paper, presidency. We're not operating two versions of 2024 budget, says Nigi raised unsubstantiated claims to fuel divisive rhetoric. Declares Tinubu government not anti-North, equitable to all. Senate debates budget padding behind closed doors. Appropriation panel meet. Northern senators move against colleague. More details can be found on page 5. Celebrating International Women's Day. That is the picture story we have on the paper. IPPG expresses support for Tinubu's executive order on Nigeria's oil and gas industry. Details can be found on page 31, and that's all the news on this day newspaper.
On the Daily Sun newspaper, cooking gas dealers, buyers lament price sought seek federal government's intervention. Hope that the federal government really get into action. More detail of that can be found on page 7 of the paper. And then we're still having the big story still on the issue of the budget padding, which we've been seeing on most of the papers. Soldiers claim killing 20 IPOP fighters in Imo, destroy 50 hideouts, attack camps not out pro-Biafra group. You can find detail in the paper. I have intelligence on killing in Ibo State coming from the governor himself. Revoke unlawful directive to block Nigerians' phone lines or face legal action, Serap tells NCC. And we have Tinubu orders custom to return seized food items to the owners, more detailed on page 21. Nigeria's inflation to hit 30.3%. This is coming from the UK-based Economic Intelligence Group. Advise the federal government to use external borrowing to rebuild the forex reserve and stabilize the naira. More detail can be found in the paper. We have picture stories still showing us celebrating Mother's Day at one of the Anglican church in Abuja yesterday, and that's all on Daily Sun newspaper. But before we continue further with other paper analysis, we would love to take a break. Quite a number of stories from the issue happening at the National Assembly down to word we're having the issue of abduction in IDPs and in Kaduna, and then we're seeing that a number of them have recovered, have been confirmed to return back to the camp. So we would love to hear your own views concerning any other story that is of interest. So please stay tuned with us. We'll be right back after the break.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, it's still the dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the paper. We're also seeing an analysis coming from the UK Intelligence Group concerning the fact that if care is not taking, the inflation of Nigeria will be going to up by 30.3%. And also we're seeing that there seems to be a little friction in the National Assembly concerning the 2024 budget, and many other stories on the front page of the paper and more. So just like we said before we went on the break, we would love to hear your own views and opinions concerning any story that is of interest to you. Please do well to drop it and then follow us live on Facebook. I still have Rachel Tanzin in the studio. Thank you.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Nation newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, CBN screens bank's financial report for infractions. Foreign investors pump $823 million into forex market. Pro-Shaibu protesters seek end to impeachment move. Sultan pronounces today as first day of Ramadan month. Audit report indicts NUPRC customs for non-remittance into Federation account. Details can be found on page 5. The big story, presidency slams senator over budget padding claim. Is divisive antics to achieve from medial end. 3 North senators kick. And then we have a statement that says the mix-up was created by Nigi. The appropriation bill signed into an act on January 1st, 2024 is 28.7 trillion naira and not 25 trillion naira as claimed by him. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 4. Pencom didn't give federal government 10 trillion naira loan. Agency not a bank, says the Director General. Disco explained blackout in Kwara or your Ogun. And then we have 40,000 Ogun farmers get lift. More details can be found on page 6. And we have a Yari annual Ramadan feeding program benefits 250,000 households. And I believe this is an editorial. We saw it on the previous paper. You can find details on the front page, and that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, we're having estimators peg exchange rate at 1,400 naira to a dollar as the naira finds a fair value. Now we're seeing that the naira value measurement here, we're seeing bid on the Goldman Sachs liquidated entity and then going concern, and then the purchasing power of the naira in relation to the dollar. You can do well to have a closer look at it and read more detail of that story. Delays, uncertainty in student loan scheme compound woes. This is a news and analysis you can find on page 4. Federal government lawmakers fault budget padding claims for Rua urges the probe. More detail of that on page 3. Security agency mom as search for abducted Kuriga school pupils continues. More detail of that on page 6. To stem rising food prices and anger in the land, this is an editorial you can find on page 12. NDLEA intercept illicit drug consignment in commercial bus engine, arrest 2 grandpas. More detail on page 9. Governors unveil proactive steps to address the food crisis in the land. More detail of that in the paper. Syrup asks NCC to restore blocked phone lines. You can find more detail of that in the paper, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, Tinubu launches student loan Thursday. Foreign scholars seek inclusion. Only foreign borrowing can save Naira. Clear CBN debt. This is coming from EIU. Naira devaluation fueling massive regional exports, coming from governors. The big story on the paper, schools in 14 states, FCT rigs attack, says the federal government. Adamawa, Bauchi, Borno, Katsina, FCT others affected, 465 pupils, women in kidnappers dead. Federal government receiving U.S. support to free victims. Presidency alleges sub-regional force behind kidnapping. We have picture story where we see Ramadan begins today. Sultan says prayer against insecurity and hardship, where we can see the sighting of the moon with that in Saudi Arabia, in Jerusalem, and then prayers in Egypt. Oil earnings rise by 450 billion naira in 2 months, a report from the federal government. Ogun police nabbed 3 for murder attempt. Blackout worsens as hoodlums vandalize transmission line. And that's all the news on the Punch newspaper.
The issue of vandalizing, either we have rail lines being vandalized, pipes of the water ministry being vandalized. Here we're having that even transmission lines have been vandalized. Now, we've been having this reoccurrence happening often. And my concern and my worry is, what is the government doing about this? Because for every time we have hoodlums either vandalizing or either, because most times they don't do this alone. We've had issues where we see them even working with some quote unquote security agency, some uniform people that actually help them. Because Rachel, it only takes somebody who knows the use of this to be able to sell it, and then you get buyers eventually. Because if you don't know the use of it, you cannot have a buyer. Rachel, you and I cannot buy a transmission line. What do you intend to do with it?
We don't even know how to vandalize
so
it.
the question is, what is the government doing to prevent this? Because it's becoming like a normal thing. And I do not want this to be normalized in Nigeria, where we say that it's a normal thing. So that we see a railway rail line has been vandalized. We see that we see water pipes. I remember about 2 weeks or 3 weeks back when we called the water ministry here in Plateau State, and like, there's no water in this area and all of that. And they're like, we're sorry, some of the pipelines were stolen. And I asked, how? How?
Yeah.
Don't we have people who are supposed to protect this thing? And even when we get them being stolen eventually, how do they get buyers eventually? It only takes somebody who knows the use of it. Imagine stealing a pipe that is as big as this, Rachel. You don't intend to use this in your home, do you?
Of course not.
Of course, something needs to be done. So we don't have this reputation. Now we're saying that because of the action of some few individuals, a whole community will be left without light. Why? Because certain people decided to do this thing. So I'm calling on the government of various states in the country to please do something. We have commissioners that are heading these various sectors or actually parasata. They should make sure that they do something to make sure that these things are safe under their custody. Or they should end up, maybe when they start deducting from your salary, you start doing something better to make sure that these things are actually being safe. So we look forward to seeing if you need to even work with some of these vigilantes in the community to make sure that things are not being, I think they should do something like this. So we don't have reputation of all of this is happening often in the country.
I mean, first of all, this is a crime that is usually a type of crime usually related to third world countries and developing countries, such as vandalizing rail tracks and electric lines and all of that. And you just wonder, just as you said, there is a demand before we have supply, either way. And then there has to be a cut in the demand. Because as long as somebody is illegally demanding for somebody to go and get rail tracks, we will have a supply for it. And that's why we keep seeing these criminals and all of that. And most of the times, it's not to go and build rail tracks and sell it. We are looking at heavy metals and steel. They are being sold as scrap, renewed into different forms of other metals. Usually it's not to go and build another track elsewhere. It's just going to be used for something else, because first of all, it's not enough. You would have to steal the entire rail track reading from one state to another before you can go and rebuild another rail track elsewhere. You understand? So obviously this crime is not to go and build another rail track somewhere. Is for it to become scrap. That's to tell you that's how backward it is and how it is a third world underdeveloped kind of crime. Because now this metal, this steel, this iron, we know how the rail tracks are. And when you see them, these are the kinds of, and that is why it's even very expensive for us, because importing such back into the country, since we don't have our steel rolling mills functional and all of that, is going to be very expensive. We're looking at billions of investment to have rail tracks fully functional, and that's why we are only seeing states like Lagos that have that kind of money putting it in place. For an average state in Nigeria to start putting new rail tracks, they would have to generate a lot of income or spend so much money that they will not, that will leave the state in debt for a very long period of time. When you look at this, you know that we don't have that quality production in the country right now. It has to be imported, and this is going to be sold as scrap to be used to make something else out of these metals and all of that. And you just see backwardness. Because if you're not building new tracks elsewhere and you are destroying this one, what could be restored can't be restored anymore. And we're looking at making from the scratch, and we don't even have money to maintain this one. How do we have to build from the beginning and all of that? So I just hope something is done. And then it also tells the government that, you know what, all of these things that you know are important and are out there lying down, revive them, renew them, renovate them, wake them up and make them functional. Then if activity is going on, they are no longer abandoned, and then eyes, now security eyes will be on it. But by the time you have our rail being abandoned and these criminals know, even if we stay today till tomorrow harvesting these metals and removing these rail tracks, for example, nobody will come and nab us, nobody will come and grab us. So they do it. But by the time there's activity going on, exactly, it makes it more difficult. And when it comes to electricity, I want to believe that is with the know of experts, because it's being removed to be used elsewhere. And we know how corrupt our system is in this country. In every sector, electricity is not excluded. And then it has to be with the know of an expert. It's electricity we are talking about. It's not you unlocking a door and going in to steal television. No, we're talking about electricity. You have to know what you're doing. And of course,
you will lose your life.
You will lose your life. So we are not, these criminals, we are not looking at people that don't know what they are doing. If one or two are just there as accomplice to this crime, helping to maybe transport the good, the person that is actually removing these wires and all of that is an expert. And that is where we begin from, because you have to, who are the people in charge of these areas, electricity, transmission line and all of that, when things are missing in transformers and all of that. Even if I am a thief, I don't know what a mercury in a transformer looks like. So I can't even go and start, thinking of stealing what I don't know. How will I get it out? What and all of that. So this is an organized crime by experts in the field who know the way forward. And therefore the criminals are not far out of reach. They are still within the cycle of the people in charge of fixing this thing. They are still the same people taking things out from it. So let the authorities do the needful. Search within yourself and you'll definitely find your answers.
Very true. You should search within yourself, because that is where the question lies. Well, let's take a look at Nigerian News Direct, where we have expertly employment levy suspension. CPPE commend the federal government and calls for strengthening regulators. More detail of that can be found inside the paper. A delicate defend appointment of new Obas, insists due process was followed. And still talking about the International Women's Day of 2024, Glow launches She Glows. You can find more on page 11. Presidency Nasini launch portal for female engineers to access funding. You can find more on page 11. And we have Hertz Holding unveil Hertz technologies to lead African digital evolution. And on food insecurity, governors speak on strategies adopted to tackle the hardship. More detail of that can be found inside the paper. The big story is what we've seen on most of our paper today on the issue of budget paddling. More detail of that can be found on page 30, and that's all on Nigerian News Direct.
On New Telegraph newspaper, from CBN, letters of credit payment dropped by 4.1% to $1.31 billion. Ethiopian Airlines, no financial loss incurred on Nigerian air venture. Lagos to demolish structures on drainages in Apapa. How corruption in judiciary can be tamed. This is coming from lawyers. And from the defense headquarters, troops destroy 50 IPOP camps and kill 20. The big story, signed death warrant for convict execution. Statesmen tell the governors as condemned inmate figure hit 3,306. Call for cases review on merit where necessary. This is on decongesting the correctional centers in the country. Details can be found on page 2. Sokoto abduction. No Nigerians should be in captivity, Abbas tell security agencies. Politics of empty treasury and debt as federal government blames Buhari for economic crisis. Federal government suspend controversial EEL policy amid OPS mounting pressure. TCN declares system sabotage as terrorists vandalize Shiroro Katempe Towers. You can find details on page 37 and 25. Tinubu implementing 28.7 trillion 2024 budget as passed by National Assembly. At the downside of the paper, this is coming from dietitians. High fiber diet can prevent colon cancer. So you know what? Just browse what are high fiber foods. Put more of that in your meals and you will be free from colon cancer eventually. You can find details on page 27, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
On Daily Independent newspaper, syrup threatening NCC with lawsuit for blocking Nigerians' phone lines. Presidency denies claims of operating two versions of the 2024 budget, says the budget not anti-not debunks the allegation of 3 trillion naira padding. Detail found inside the paper. The big story coming from an analyst that said the new CBN interest rate will put real sector under pressure. Security operatives killed 20 IPOP fighters in Imo gun battle, recover assorted weapons. Fire got Kanu electricity transmission station market in Yenugwa. Detail of that can be found on page 6. Vandals plunge FCT residents into darkness again. And we have governors adopt fresh strategies to end food crisis and economic hardship. Downside still talking of abduction. It's time to act fast, says Rep Speaker. More detail on page 7. We have a picture story here still talking about the Women's Day for in Abuja on Sunday. You can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of stories that is of interest to you.
On the Daily Times newspaper, the big story, presidency, Northern senators bicker over alleged 3 trillion naira budget padding. Details can be found on page 5. How FX market intricacies down petrol importation. Ball leaves women-owned businesses with BOI, Bank of Industry leads women-owned businesses with $6.02 million. You can find more details on page 2. No clues yet as bandits hold on to 502 abductees. Tinubu to launch student loan scheme Thursday. RMAFC calls for cut in governance costs, endorses Orosanye report. Details can be found on the front page and continue inside the paper. Ramadans begin today. You can find details on page 2, and that's all the news on the Daily Times newspaper.
Let's take a look at the national economy newspaper based on business news. Only 30 million Nigerians registered for electricity access coming from the NIP. You can find detail of that on page 5. Reviewing guidelines for the MRC. More of that also can be found on page 15. We have currency buying, selling, inflation rate 2022, 2023, and also the prices of commodities. You can do well to find more detail of that. We have the big story here that say 150% surge in cement costs take toll on housing sector. We've seen where even landlords have implemented that by increasing their house rent because of the prices of all of these goods in the market. Reason fintech firms do not trust each other. You want to know why? Find more detail of that on page 10 of the national economy, and that's all on national economy newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, gagged Eagle striker subdued as Ajibade assists in Spain. And on African Games, gold medal swoop for Nigeria on day 3. Stalemate at Anfield, where we have Liverpool drawing with Man City 1-1. Chelsea versus Newcastle Blues, Magpies in mid-table clash. Tanimu set for first Eagle test. Details can be found on page 7. Mourinho eyes return. Radcliffe approves £100 million for Neves. And then we have Joe Boniface endorses Omuneke for Eagles job. The big story on the paper, Osho's Eagles debut uncertain after defender picks up injury. We have doubtful. That is the big story. And at the downside of the paper, On cricket, female Yellow Greens reach African Games semis. City open folding contract talks. More details can be found on page 5. And we have our EPL table picture. Arsenal at the top, heading with some points and goal differences. And we have Liverpool followed by Manchester City. And that's all the news on Point Sports Extra.
Let's take a look at what's happening in the world of nature on Nature News, where we have millions face food crisis in Nigeria. This is the CH report. You can find more detail. You can see picture stories of during the talking about what happened where we had a warehouse being buckled by Nigerians and they were hungry. So you can find more detail of that in the paper. Balarabe meets stakeholders to implement WACA environment program. Tinubu to launch food security agricultural mechanism agenda today. More detail on page 5. Nigeria can't fix current food inflation with monetary policy, coming from the president of the African Development Bank. Additional, you can find detail of that in the paper. Also, we have AWD drop to install 100 boreholes in Kogi State. That's really commendable, so we can have safe drinking water. High demand as residents turn to clay pots in Taraba State. You can find that on page 19. And on the fact check, are electric cars a myth? You can find that also on page 13. And we also have downside of the paper, Molly achieved dream goal on emotional night. More detail of that on page 21. And that's all on Nature newspaper, and also how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Richard, for
You're welcome, Celine.
and also thank you to our viewers, our supporters, for always keeping it with us on the program. Until we come tomorrow, do have a blessed Monday ahead.